Hello, I'm Andrew Thomas Price. Welcome to my channel, and today I'll be taking a look at the Mors Kochanski 2 kilogram survival kit. And in a separate video, I'll be using the contents of this kit to create a super shelter and sleeping out overnight. So stay with me. Mors Kochanski was a survival instructor who specialized in the boreal forests of Canada. So he was from Alberta, and his style of survival has become very distinctive, and a lot of us emulate certain aspects of it. One of them is the 2 kilogram survival kit, which was designed to allow a person to survive overnight in freezing conditions in the boreal forest. So it works on the principle that you'll also be using a lot of natural materials as well as the contents of this kit. So the kit itself has the raw materials, and then it also provides the tools that you can use to harvest flexible saplings, logs, firewood, and all the other materials that you might need to survive in a very cold environment in that part of the world. So the whole kit is designed to weigh around 2 kilograms or slightly less, and it fits inside a billy can. The type of billy can that Mors used was slightly different to this. It had a different type of bale handle and a pouring spout, but are roughly the same size as this zebra pot. The contents include various items for fire lighting, as well as items that can be used to create what he called a super shelter, which was a type of very interestingly designed emergency shelter that would incorporate flexible branches as well as logs for a raised bed. So we'll start off with a few of the items in the kit. So the pot itself holds about, I think this one holds about 2 liters. This would be used for melting snow. In a frozen environment, you will not find any water that you can just drink as it is or boil it, so you have to be melting either ice or snow. The pot itself is perfect for that, as long as you can light a fire to put the pot over. The pot also can be used as a snow shovel, so you can use it to excavate a snow shelter or anything of that nature. So very useful tool, and it can be used to cook food as well as to boil water for hot drinks, etc. The pot also contains a small first aid kit. Cuts are always a possibility, especially if you're using tools, so you'll need the ability to treat those wounds using things like antiseptic wipes and small wound dressings, plasters, that sort of thing. So this kit is not that comprehensive, just covers the very basics with one elasticated bandage and quite a few dressings, as well as some gloves. So it's a very basic first aid kit just for small cuts and injuries like that. It's ideal for treating those injuries that you might get while you're out and about, rather than any serious traumatic injuries which your larger first aid kit would take care of. So that's the first aid kit. Mors was also a big fan of knives. The knife that Mors used most of his career, right up until the last few years of his career, was a Mors knife, which was based on the very traditional Scandinavian knife. This is actually made by Mors Kniv in Sweden, and this is the companion model, which is about a 4-inch blade, very basic, inexpensive survival knife. Mors always wore his knife on a lanyard around his neck. This one doesn't have the lanyard, but that's a very good, very basic, inexpensive option for survival. That can be used for everything from game preparation to carving wood, making pot hangers, making traps, etc. I've also included a small UK legal folding knife. This is the Castrom Larsfalt UK legal folder. A really nice, and unusually for a folding knife, it has a Scandi grind, which makes it very good for carving wood. Because it's a slip joint, I wouldn't use this for heavy cutting and batoning, but it is a very good knife for fine carving work and general purpose knife work. So a very suitable knife for the woodsman. The other contents include a large piece of polythene. This is just a painter's dust sheet, which you can buy in pound stores here in the UK or dollar stores in the States. A very inexpensive item. Very thin polythene, you have to be quite careful with it, but this forms the basis of the super shelter, which I'll be showing you in another video. This covers the entire shelter, and because it's thin, clear plastic, it allows radiant heat from the fire to enter the shelter and forms the very effective insulating principle of that type of shelter. So I'll put that here. Mors also included some fire starting tinder. I think he just used cotton wool and Vaseline in most of the kits that I've seen him demonstrate. This is a exogel, so it's a air transportable fuel that is made by Polymath products. So it's a gel that is very flammable and can be used to light fires, or you could also use this if you couldn't light a fire for any reason. You can just use this in some sort of container to heat some water for a drink. So it's quite useful, easy to use. You just open the top there, and like toothpaste, you just squeeze a little bit out, and that will light with a ferro rod as well. So very useful, doesn't weigh very much, and it forms part of my emergency kit. Some paracord. There's probably around 10 meters here. Paracord is excellent. This is 550 paracord, which is very strong, and it can be used for making a bow drill, or you can take it apart and use the 7 inner strands, which are much thinner, as fishing lines or for making traps and things like that. So it's a very useful thing to have. I always have a length of paracord with me wherever I am. I have a DD lightweight tarp here, which replaces what Mors would always refer to a section of parachute silk when he was describing this technique for building a super shelter. Now, I didn't have any parachute silk with me, but I've got this very small, I think this is a 2.5 meters by 3.5 meters DD hammock tarp, and it's an excellent, very compact tarp which fits very well into here, and that would replace the parachute that Mors talks about. We also have a mylar sheet or mylar blanket, sometimes called a space blanket. These can be picked up very cheaply from dollar stores, pound shops, things like that. And this is used in the super shelter as a reflective surface at the back of the shelter, and that reflects radiant heat back into the shelter. So the radiant heat from the fire comes through the polythene, hits the back of the shelter, and is radiated back towards whoever's in that shelter. So it forms a very important part of the super shelter design. Mors also included a heavy-duty black bin bag, or some sort of bin liner. This is used for several things. He describes it as being an emergency gilet, which will help to keep your torso, your core warm. It can also be used for a myriad of other uses, making a browse bed, any kind of waterproofing. So just a handy thing to have, as well as being useful as a bin bag. Right then, in here we have a candle. Now this is quite important. Now the super shelter design is intended to be used with a fire. Now if for any reason you couldn't use your fire, couldn't have the materials or any problems with lighting the fire, if you can light a candle in your shelter, that will give the equivalent heat of another person. It's 300 BTUs of heat. So if you're in a shelter, you're on your own, but you can light one candle, that gives you the heat of having a companion with you. So that's a surprising amount of additional heat. And if you're in a shelter like a super shelter, it will retain that heat quite well. So if you had 2 candles, that's the equivalent of having 2 people with you. So if you've ever been in a small shelter with multiple people, it gets warm very quickly. So that's quite good to know. That candle would probably last at least 1 full night if we kept it upright and looked after it. I've also got some matches. I'm a big believer, as Mors was, in having multiple methods of fire lighting. And we have a match safe here. This is waterproof. I've got a little compass glued to the top as well. And this holds about 20 strike anywhere matches. So I've also got a few other things in here. So I've got the matches. I've got a tiny ferrocerium rod, and I've put a couple of very small birthday candles as well. So these are great for fire lighting. So if you've got, right at the bottom there, I've got some cotton wool as tinder. So just this one little container is a small survival kit in itself. So I've got my matches, I've got multiple methods of fire lighting. I've got a normal cigarette lighter here, which uses a flint and butane to light the fire. They're okay, they're not too good if the temperature gets down very, very low, but as long as the temperature's, you know, around freezing or just slightly above, these work really, really well. In an emergency, if the fuel is gone, you still have this spark which you can get from the wheel there, so you can use that with tinder as well. Ferrocerium rod. Mors was a huge fan of these. So these are included. I normally have at least 2 of these with me. I'll have one in my main kit, and then I'll generally have one in a pocket somewhere as well. They're not too expensive, but each one of these will give you about 16,000 strikes, so that's potentially 16,000 fires, so well worth putting in your kit. An emergency compass. I would always have a full-size silver compass with me anyway, but if I did become separated from my main equipment, it's useful to have a basic compass like this. This is from Polymath products, and it's a very small button compass, but it's surprisingly accurate. It's very stable. It gets to the point very quickly. The needle settles down very well, and that's a nice emergency backup compass just to give you a rough idea of direction finding. And then, last but certainly not least, and this is a tricky one to take out without injuring yourself. I've got both ends just like a snake. Here we go. So we have a good quality Barco bow saw blade. This has got the teeth profile for working dry wood, and if you put a couple of mini carabiners on the end, this can be used to make a very effective emergency buck saw or bow saw, which can then be used to cut fairly large firewood for building a shelter. So just in this very small compact little pot, we've got all the makings of one emergency survival camp that should see us through the night. In the next video, I'll be showing you how it all works. The kit includes a bow saw blade. Now, a blade on its own is very hard to use effectively, but by taking a thin sapling like this piece of hazel here, we can make a frame and turn this into a very useful buck saw or frame saw. So I'm just going to use a little folding pocket knife, my Castrom Lars folder here, put a little bit of tension on this piece of hazel just quite low down where it meets the ground, put a little bit of tension on there, cutting and through. There you go. So I need to cut this to length, and then we can fit the saw blade. So I'll just cut it off probably around here, and I'll use the knife just to tidy up the ends, remove any little branches. For a small folding knife, it's surprisingly good. That Scandi blade is perfect for working wood, so you can carve with it, you can use it for just about any task. So what I'm going to do is just make a start using the knife just to make a little split here, which allows the saw blade to bed in. And I'll do the same at this end. Okay, it's quite important to be slow and steady doing it like this, because an unsupported blade can be quite tricky to hold. Let's get in there. Okay. There you go, that took a couple of minutes. Now we just need to do the other side and we can fit the blade. In the videos I've watched of Mors doing this, he tends to use a couple of little bolts, puts them in the kit. But I like these mini carabiners because they're lightweight and they do the job, and they also have multiple purposes as well, so they work well. Now what we need to do is to fit the saw blade into the split that we've made in this hazel. So I'll put the fat end in first, turn the carabiner on its side, that should lock in place there. Then we need to use the flexibility. I'm just going to very carefully move my hands up here. You need to use the flexibility in the hazel to bring this down. You do need to be quite careful when you're doing this because it's under a lot of tension. And give it a little twist, make sure any kinks in the blade are twisted out. And here we have a finished improvised bow saw. Let's see how it works. Now, because it has this flexible frame, you do have to use it with a little bit more delicacy than a full-size frame saw, but it will do the job just using the sharp teeth it has here. So let's get it started. just begin very gently, let that blade settle itself in. There you go. Now you have to work at probably half the amount of pressure and half the amount of speed that you might with a normal bow saw, but it works very well and it will cut through just about any reasonable diameter firewood. So now that we've made our saw, we can use it to help build our shelter. Well, I think that's about all there is to say about the Mors Kochanski 2 kilogram survival kit. However, after finishing the filming, I realized I'd left one very important component out. I don't think Mors would have been very impressed with me if I didn't mention gaffer tape or duct tape. Now this stuff is very useful and it was always in the kits that Mors talked about. So it has multiple uses. It can be used as an emergency dressing if you run out of plasters. Mors always said this was antiseptic on the other side. I'm not entirely certain that's true, but if Mors said it is, it's good enough for me. It can also be used if you damage the polythene or if you damage the mylar blanket, you can repair it. Multiple uses, you can lash things together. So duct tape should have been in there, but I'm mentioning it now. And that's all there is to say. But if you've enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe and share it with your friends. And I'll also be interested in hearing what you would like to put in your kit. Would it be the same as Mors? Would it be the same as mine? Or have you got any other ideas? Please comment down below and I'll see you next time.